So my next guest retired from his job as a software engineer last year, partly to try and raise awareness of the impact of gender ideology in Wales, particularly in the area of Welsh education. Nigel Thorne creates YouTube videos under the name Turf Fan Man and founded the website whatisawoman.uk. He's particularly concerned about the impact that Judith Butler's gender theory has had on the RSE code and guidance, which is mandatory for every publicly funded school in Wales. So Nigel Thorne is here to join me now. Nigel. So, what is it about Wales? I've covered on this show some of the teaching materials that are going on in Welsh schools that are approved by Welsh politicians. So ideologically driven, you know, telling children that there are over 100 genders, talking about the idea that you can be born in the wrong body, talking about the idea that it's possible to change sex when it is biologically impossible to do so. It's like a quasi-religion in schools.
It is. And I think you have to understand when it comes to gender identity ideology. It was Leo Sapir, who's from the Manhattan Institute, who said there's two components to it, two philosophical positions which are mutually incompatible. And one is this, what he calls gender identity essentialism, this belief that we all have this innate gender identity, which is pushed by Stonewall on training courses. But there's something which is much more covert, which people don't talk about, and that is the queer theory that lies underneath it.
Yeah.
And in particular, Judith Butler. And without going into too much depth, there's a bunch of academics who think that for political purposes it's a very good thing to disseminate teaching that downplays the significance of biological sex and elevate the significance of a personal gender. And Judith Butler talks about gender being performed. You perform the role of a boy, you perform the role of a girl, and that's what makes you a boy or a girl, is what you perform.
So that's the way her theories have been interpreted. And I find that it's strange because Butler says there is no gender identity. There are kind of enacted performances that relate to gender stereotypes that give the illusion of a gender identity. But queer theorists have taken that to mean that we have a gendered soul that is fixed. Yeah. Now, this is not good to tell children, is it?
It is not good to tell children this. No, absolutely right. And it is having you see, what is going on in Wales? You can see the influence of queer theory on the relationships and sexuality education code.
Yes.
So that's mandatory for every publicly funded school in Wales. Now, there's no mention in the code of the words male or female, boy or girl, man or woman, because in Judith Butler's Gender Trouble, it says the category of sex is a name that enslaves. So these people really do think talking about sex is a bad thing. We should talk about gender instead, a personal gender.
OK, but this is very bad for gay rights, for instance, because gay rights are predicated on the idea that some people are innately attracted to members of their own sex. If there is no such thing as sex, this erodes that. It's
very bad for gay rights, but it's also bad for kids who are gender non-conforming because we rationalise through language. So what the guidance tells us is that gender now is an identity.
Okay.
So children will not be taught that gender is a synonym for sex. They will be taught that gender is an identity. So a word that was an objective truth has been redefined as a subjective feeling. Now, we all rationalise using language, and children rationalise their feelings using language. So there's no doubt that, in my mind, and in the minds of plenty of others, that those gender non-conforming boys and girls who don't fit into the stereotypical boy or girl, if they feel a bit left out, a bit different, they will rationalise those feelings by subscribing to the belief that they have a gender that doesn't match their sex.
OK, and of course we've seen the problems with that with the Tavistock Clinic in the UK, which of course is going to be closed any moment now, because as the Cass Review found, this is actually a danger to gender non-conforming kids.
Absolutely.
Now, what is it about Wales? We've had a lot of pushback in England against gender identity ideology. In Wales, it seems to be completely embedded. Why?
There is a raft of groups that are trying to talk to the Welsh Government and are not being listened to.
Right.
And those groups include LGB Alliance Cymru, Merched Cymru, who are documenting the impact of this on the ground in schools. So there are reports of boys sharing showers with girls and boys sharing sleeping accommodation with girls and kids being socially transitioned without their parents' knowledge. All this is going on. That's documented by Merched Cymru.
Now, this is very dodgy ground because schools have a responsibility to provide single-sex toilet facilities, bathroom facilities. That's a legal obligation, isn't it?
Well, you would think so if you're reading the Equality Act and all the rest of it in the proper way. But I guess this has become so embedded. People really do think, or some people really do think, that the fact you identify as a boy makes you a boy. The fact you identify as a girl makes you a girl.
But that, as I say, is a quasi-religious belief and a political belief.
It is.
Now, the problem here is Kemi Badenoch stood up in Parliament and made it very clear that critical race theory, the promotion of critical race theory in schools was against the law because it violates the Education Act.
Yeah.
How is it not? Surely it's the case, and I know this hasn't been tested in court, but surely it's the case that the promotion of gender identity ideology, a belief system not grounded in reality or science, is also against the law, isn't it? Well,
a court case was taken, the Welsh Government were taken to court last year. Public Child Protection Wales took them to court, and gender theory was one of the things that complained about. Now, that wasn't successful, but one of the judge did say that schools cannot promote beliefs that contradict the beliefs, the philosophical and religious beliefs of parents.
Right.
So there should be that could put a stop to this.
Well, the belief that biological sex is immutable is actually protected by law. We know that since the Maya Forstater case, right? So they are laying the groundwork for future court cases and all sorts of problems here, aren't they?
You would think so. You would think so. The problem is, they've got the Welsh Government are committed to provide transgender guidance.
Yes.
That was supposed to be published this last summer. So that's been delayed until next year now.
Right.
And schools are just working off transgender toolkits that are being created by activists. So that's why and these activists are saying things like, one of the toolkits, I think, which is from the Vale of Glamorgan, said that just because this trans boy, this assigned male at birth male, has the body of a boy, he is a girl in every other way.
Okay.
And you think, well, this makes no sense at all.
No, of course not. Now, that's the problem, isn't it? Maybe with all these activist groups like Stonewall, like Mermaids, coming into schools and promoting their ideology as though it were true, as though it was uncontested.
Yeah.
And the schools, because it sounds very complex, a lot of the teachers and headmasters and headmistresses, they don't understand it. So they think, well, we'll just try and be inclusive. We'll just try and be nice. We're all for equality. And they get hoodwinked.
They get hoodwinked. And the boundaries are completely dissolved. And that's the problem. So girls are suffering, gay children are suffering. Of course, autistic children are suffering because they're very vulnerable as well.
Okay.
So it is a category of children, and we know this from Time to Think, the book about the Tavistock, that there are some children who will be particularly susceptible to this belief system.
Yes.
That's gay children or gender non-conforming children, that's autistic children, that's looked after children, and the evidence is all there. So why this is still being pushed is extraordinary. But the Welsh Government will not talk to groups.
Well, I suppose it's because it's a belief system that doesn't care about evidence. And actually, I think that's true.
Well,
the evidence is overwhelming and incontestable, really, at this point.
You would think so. It's a religious belief system. Now, what will come out? They've dug a hole so deep, I'm not quite sure how they're going to backtrack. But maybe they will hopefully reverse ferret when this new transgender guidance comes out.
Well, we'll keep an eye on what the Welsh Government are doing, because I think it is very disturbing. Nigel Thorne, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.